On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk the Ventura OS, CEDIA's new learning platform, and Dish is no longer with DirecTV. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 460, an extremely low bar. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Jeremy Glowacki. He's the executive editor of Residential Tech Today. How you doing, Jeremy?
Oh, doing well. Thanks for having me. It's been a bit since I last saw you on this podcast because
I've been avoiding
our other guest today was the host the last time I was on. So good to see you again, Matt.
That lovely gentleman. Good to see you as well. And he's referring to is Mr. Patrick Norton. He's a content specialist at CTI and has filled in for me a little bit when I've been on vacation. How you doing, Patrick?
I am doing good. Thinking about subwoofers and Gelsinger leaving Intel, which has nothing to do, well, half of that has nothing to do with the podcast today. Yeah, but there's lots of interesting stuff.
There is. First of all, hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and survived Cyber Monday, which is almost over, thankfully. Yeah. I enjoyed mine. I had turkey. It was great. All right. We are going to kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. The Trade Desk is planning to launch a content agnostic smart TV OS. It says it has Sonos, surprisingly, as supporting for a new streaming TV operating system that aims to make streaming TV advertising more efficient. This is just I don't want to say it's an odd article, but this is just interesting to follow. So go read through the article. Essentially, the Ventura OS is seeking to maximize relevant advertising on smart TV. And I would posture that I would like advertising to be gone from my smart TV, but that's just me. Jeremy, not that I don't know where to start with this. Who is going to buy into an agnostic smart TV platform from either the manufacturing side or possibly as like a software update that a homeowner is going to do? I'm confused as how this is going to play out.
It took me a lot of focus to get through this article and understand what was going on.
Zach wrote a great article.
He did.
It's complicated crap.
It's a complicated topic, and it's something I hadn't even given any thought to, except that Michael Heiss, when he goes to CES, he's always coming back with these topics about these smart TV platforms and how, there's the time when there's the free TV. It's going to be, the hardware is free, and it's supported by this advertising program, right? So that's a concept that's out there, and it's mentioned in this article as well. There are people that would rather get a discount on their streaming service by having some sort of an advertising, ingredient. If you can make that where it's not repeating the same ads over and over again, maybe that's what this is, where it's targeted toward things that somehow know what you like and your preferences. I always find that a little scary. I never even liked the original Amazon book recommendations because I felt like it was creepy that it was telling me what I liked. And that was not even anything like close to what is going on with technology these days. So I'm not a big fan of it figuring me out, but I can see where people would say, I don't want to pay the premium for all these streaming services. Let me have the ad version, but can I have a less, redundant, repetitive? It happens when you're off the network streaming, when you're not on like regular, what would be cable TV, and you're in a streaming package. I feel like, for instance, like MLB, this is a really specific one, but if you're watching Major League Baseball, there's like 3 ads that just cycle through the entire game. Yeah. And if you're watching a baseball game, it just kills you, You can't get to the mute button fast enough. And if you're like saying, well, I am going to have to deal with commercials on this, but if they can be not repetitive and they can be more specific to things that you may actually want, maybe that's better. That's the only thing I can see where this makes sense. I don't see how it gets integrated. I don't know if these smart TV platforms that are just embedded are going the manufacturers are going to jump on board with this, and that's just going to be something that's invisible to the end user. And we just, as a consumer, you don't even know that that's how this happened. It just all of a sudden it's more curated, or catering to the individual. That's all I can see.
Patrick, supposedly this is being backed by Disney, Paramount, Tubi, and Sonos. We'll get to Sonos in a second. But they're saying the goal of the system is to offer the OS to device makers who don't want to run Google, Amazon Fire TV, Roku OS, etc. Who are those manufacturers?
Yeah, so I've been telling people I'll do a podcast. It's home theater and audio stuff. It's very personal. It's very DIY. And we've been telling people for years, we just kind of gave up on operating systems from television manufacturers. I will say they have gotten better, but there was a time when, if you got a year and a half, 2 years of reasonable behavior, with basic stuff like Netflix,
the bar was really low, though. The bar was extremely low.
The bar was extremely low, but you'd be sitting there and the updates would stop, or the operating system would get kludgy, or you would find out that it was completely insecure, and it was just got to the point where turn everything off, plug an Apple TV or a Roku into it, stop thinking about it. Your life will be happier, or use, whatever third-party platform you want. And, this announcement from the trade desk about the Ventura streaming TV operating system is missing one critical thing. They did not announce a single television partner. Right. And that to me is a red flag. So a bunch of ad guys thought to themselves, well, free ad supported television is kind of a big deal. Now, fast channels, Tubi, Freevee, it's funny, right? Freevee is Amazon's, but Amazon decided to add ad supported tiers to Amazon Prime. Therefore, they are folding all of the content from Freevee into Amazon because, I guess it's just odd, right? Because fast channels, like most of the articles I can see from, industry rags, and I say rags with affection, the Hollywood Reporter and other stuff, they're like, well, we see a short and a medium term life for these, but nobody sees them lasting very long term. Like they were this thing that popped up, it has a life, it's going to go away. So I look at this and I'm like, okay, so ad technology company decides they're going to build a television operating system because it's better for them.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like the running joke, like, people don't realize, like YouTubers, they're like, why don't they listen to me? And so they don't listen to you and they don't listen to the viewers because the actual client is the advertisers. Yeah. And this is great if a whole bunch of companies suddenly decide, like, Samsung's going to give up everything they get out of the television operating system that they build so they can simplify the targeting of advertising and make more this is something that only an ad technology company could love, and maybe a few people adjacent to that.
So let me ask both of you about the elephant in the article. What in the world is Sonos doing in this article?
Well, I think AdWeek, they got a quote from, one of their analysts that said, quote, the most likely path for Ventura is for TTD to partner with a number of manufacturers with small market share like Sonos, Panasonic, Haier, etc., to build an install base and give those manufacturers a way to enter the ad business via an established demand-side platform operator. So, I don't think it would be that hard for Sonos. Well, sorry. Okay. A year and a half ago, I would not have thought it would be that hard for Sonos to integrate or build their own, I can totally see them like putting some processing power in a sound bar to connect to the HDMI port on a television to have a television operating system. As of a few months ago, I am no longer even remotely on board with their ability to do that. But,
So this is the only thing I've been able to find that it comes to us from AFT News or AFTV News. Never heard of them, which might just be me. But they're saying that it's a combination of, as Patrick Spence was quoted saying, We were excited to explore the integration of premium audio and video with the Trade Desk and Ventura OS. So is this the occasionally rumored streaming device that Sonos seems to possibly want to play with? And if they do, I have other places I could suggest to Mr. Spence where they could invest some capital. If you want, feel free to reach out. I'm sure you've heard this before, but maybe your app, maybe. All right. That way you don't get, influential podcasters calling you out on Thanksgiving. Anyways, we'll leave that alone. All right, let's change topics for a second. This comes to us from Residential Tech Today. Oh, and Jeremy Glowacki wrote this. Cool.
Hey.
CEDIA online learning platform elevates education opportunities for its members. They've got a new LMS, which is their learning management system designed to improve the online education for the smart home technology industry. Go read through the article. This is something that I'm excited about. I've done a lot of work with CEDIA over the years on their education curriculum development and a little bit on the LMS, etc. But Patrick, where is the place for industry association, organizational led training versus manufacturer training?
Well, I mean, one, I think you should take training anywhere you can get it, especially if you're dealing with, any of a number of complicated systems, right? Take all the information you can where you can. But, I think Avixa, on the commercial AV side has done a really good job of gathering together a bunch of training to, and of course certification to give people a baseline. If you have this certification from this independent third party that has, that basically everybody in the industry is a part of, you're guaranteed that your design consultants, your technicians, your engineers, whatever, understand the basics of all of the technology. There's a lot of good reasons to go to manufacturer training, but the manufacturer training, there's always going to be a marketing element there where it's like, This is why you should always use our televisions. This is why you should always use our control systems. This is why you should always use our audio systems. And sometimes, now I work in marketing now, so I'm not supposed to say things like this. Sometimes the marketing lies.
What?
And it's, and the other thing is for a lot of trade associations, if they have a legit agenda like creating open platforms that can actually communicate and interoperate with each other, sending that message directly to their members, doing the training directly with their members makes it a little bit more likely that the members, may embrace, standards that make their job easier. There's a lot of reasons to do it. Most of them I think are positive, but especially if you want to, come up with, more levels of certification or more levels, or just making sure everybody in the industry has, easy, affordable or free access to training that you think everybody in the industry should have, that's probably a good place to do it. That's one of the things you run into, right? There's a lot of people find themselves into every aspect of AV by kind of random paths. And a lot of times, they either have imposter syndrome and they want to backfill on things, or they're not quite sure what somebody told them or they taught, or is there a better way to do this? And all of these are good reasons to have, broadly accepted, written by the, the people who are respected in the field training that's available, from a third party, like CEDIA in this case.
That's a great point. Jeremy, I am not going to do a search for CEDIA's new LMS on any trade publication, because I've been in and around the association for long enough that we've talked about this a lot of times. What makes this iteration different? And has there been a change in approach that you've seen in how CEDIA is kind of going to market with their education offerings, but also in the end result of getting some of that education?
I think it's the design of it. I actually did log in and check it out, which isn't something that necessarily I always am able to do, because you need to have a certain level of CEDIA membership to get access to some of these things a lot of times. But this time I was able to, just by putting our company name in, to observe. Now there's certain things that I would need a level of membership to be able to access in it, but it's a little bit more fun packaging, I would say, or more accessible packaging of how all of these courses are presented with the LMS. Like there's a graphical element that makes it less intimidating. Again, not comparing it to what it was before, but I feel like that's what they're trying to accomplish here by just looking at the window dressing of it to start with. But then you get into it, and it's not like all brand new content. This is just a way to package a lot of years of, well, at least the past several years of webinars and live video discussions on certain technical topics. Like one was about, just would you recommend, should you ever use a mesh network was one of the topics, and they debated this, a few experts. That's one I came across. There are obviously courses that have been pre-recorded, and it records your progress. And I think that's good for an employer if they're maybe giving incentives to the employees to take some of these classes. They want a record of them accomplishing them. There are ways to track that, apparently. Basically giving you like your academic record, your transcript of what you've accomplished. So, I mean, that's really great for the techs who are going to be using this, and basically career development. So I think that's what I notice about it, how different it is from what was before. I think it's just a more accessible and more easy to kind of get it all in one place than it was before, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, gentlemen, let's hit our last story of the day. This comes to us from CE Pro. DirecTV pulls the plug on the Dish acquisition. DirecTV notified the Dish parent EchoStar about its decision to terminate the deal, ending years-long conjecture about said rumored deal. Essentially, it's dead. It's over. Jeremy, this was trying to kind of bolster DirecTV's streaming options more so than, a huge acquisition of their satellite services, etc. Is this kind of the last hurrah for satellite? Is this showing that satellite and the relevancy of satellite is pretty much done?
That's how I read it. I mean, I think that they're less and less needed in the streaming world, but then obviously you do have these rural areas where maybe that's your only option. But the idea that they were going to need to combine forces to be able to basically enhance their streaming was where this was going. I always eye mergers with some concern and skepticism because of the whole monopoly thing. But in this case, it's like these two companies just trying to kind of survive almost. So it's not what, like the old Sirius XM thing came to mind, where, that's basically a one of one kind of situation, at least for automotive, But when you see that it fails, I think that their ability definitely gets more difficult to get to what their goals are with the streaming. And again, the relevancy of these companies, I just don't see it as much as I used to just a few years ago. Dish was making a huge push in the CI channel for quite a while. Not that they've gone away at all, but I feel like that is not as relevant and important anymore. And I would kind of ask you, from your integration standpoint, and maybe it's different in Canada, I don't know. But it just, I don't see or hear.
I couldn't. Yeah, we have, off the top of my head, we have maybe 2 customers that still have satellite.
Right.
For TV, right?
Yeah.
We have a few that are using it for internet in some way, shape, or form. Starlink is obviously the big behemoth in that world. But yeah, satellite is slowly dying. There's a note in the article that says that the companies lost a combined 63% of their satellite customers since 2016.
There's a bunch of things going on here, right? The two companies separately, or together, however you want to think of them, you're still looking at like 20 million subscribers. Now, I'm sure that number is going to continue to drop, especially if more people who have been looking at sort of, EchoStar or the satellite services move over, to the new stuff. From Elon's streaming system, we'll call it. There's a lot of opportunity there, right? But the biggest reason this deal died is, I think it was like a week and a half ago, Dish's bondholders, right? So DirecTV was gonna pay $1 effectively to buy Dish from EchoStar. I think that's the way it broke down, right? So it was literally, they were going to pay $1 and they were going to assume $9.75 billion in debt, of Dish's debt. And the debt holders, for Dish, like, I think 85% of them, the numbers that's showing up in the articles I'm looking at, were like, So literally it was like they were going to lose $1.5 billion, and they were like, we'd rather deal with our incredibly difficult loss situation as is than complicate it by having to, they would have to renegotiated all of the debt as part of the purchase. And they were just like, no.
That's a hard no for me. Yeah, it's, I was looking it up, and Dish has somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 million satellite subscribers, where DirecTV has approximately 11 million subscribers. Is the end of satellite near? Like, are we coming to the point where satellite for TV is gone?
I mean, on one hand, sure, it's definitely, but there's still, never underestimate the power of inertia. There's still a lot of money going into, whoever owns the remains of AOL still gets a ridiculous amount of money every month from people who are still paying for, the same AOL dial-up service that, doesn't really exist anymore, but they pay it to keep their email address. They pay it because it's just sitting on their credit card generating money. Like, I don't remember what the number was a few years ago, but it was a staggeringly large amount of funds, by normal, not sort of, .com era insanity debt. But, this is one of those things where, I can drive through parts of the greater metro St. Louis area, and there are still a lot of dishes on roofs. Yeah. Most of them are actually, I think, still connected. And this is an area where we have 2 or 3 companies competing over, to actually, I can actually switch and, every year and drop, keep my introductory 12 months on fiber to my house, because there's 3 companies locally competing for fiber business. Yet still there are a ton of people that still have cable. There are a ton of people that still have dishes. I think it's going to continue to drop, but I'm always surprised by how long these kind of technologies or whatever you want to call them, services, they'll just keep going. Some guy who's got, 87 different services so that his bar can display all the football games is not going to want to, even if it saves them money, they're probably not going to have to figure all that out over again because they move to, streaming over a fiber optic connection or going to the local cable service or whatever it is. I don't think there's a lot of people signing up for the services, but I think the people who have it will just keep running with it. Far, far longer than makes sense to anybody in this podcast.
That's a really good perspective about the inertia. You're right, Patrick. That is so true. There are just things that are too big of a hassle or too big of a confusion for certain consumers to switch. And I think it's interesting to think back just, I don't know, 5 years ago or so when AT&T in our market, Uverse, was having they were slow to get fiber out. And so they were switching people to DirecTV to do DirecTV streaming somehow. I never quite understood how that service worked, but it was a stopgap to get an improved, service to them because they couldn't compete on the fiber yet. Now they've got fiber to our area, so they aren't pushing that anymore. But it just, that infrastructure took a while, and we're in a suburb. you hear politicians talk about the lack of broadband, quote unquote, in the rural areas still, which, you forget about that there's still areas that just don't have access.
I got into a huge argument about that when, before we ended up settling in St. Louis. It was amazing. People are like, oh my God, it's everywhere. I'm like, dude, you have, this is somebody who was in a major urban metropolis, and they had cable, and they had a couple, three, wireless options to get internet access. One which was a startup that crashed and burned, one of which had been a local sort of, ISP that refused to die. And also were kept upgrading their service, which Comcast, which covered the area, did not. So they remained incredibly popular. But it amazes me how many people don't realize until, Elon started setting up his streaming services. A lot of people don't realize that, huge swaths of the United States and Canada have, don't even have dial-up internet access, or they have sub DSL. Or they have it also didn't help that I want to say Verizon spent a lot of money 15, 20 years ago getting state legislatures to basically cut and paste laws they had put together to prevent municipalities from creating their own ISPs, no matter how desperately, first we have to refuse to wire them, and we'll never finish that process. Mm-hmm. But so nobody will get internet, but we won't lose a business opportunity in the process. So it's again, like I said, inertia. I actually looked it up. As of 2021, there were 1.5 million monthly AOL customers paying about $10 or $15 a month for, I will presume, to keep their email addresses. And they made the email accounts free in 2006. So that's all right.
People are still shocked around here. And again, we're 2 hours from Detroit, an hour and a half to Toronto. I'm in a city of 475,000 people. You go 15 minutes outside of city limits, and you are talking point-to-point internet, because most roads, and again, we're rural, but we're not that rural. We have the busiest highway in North America, 3 minutes south of me. But you go out in the sticks, and you will have possibly point-to-point with at most 50 megs down until Starlink came in, right? But we would get customers that would move out into the country because they wanted to get out of the city and go, oh, I'm going to remote into my office. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago, even. And we'd come out and go, you don't have anything, man. You don't have Bell, which would be phone here. You don't have Rogers or some other company, which would be cable. You are stuck point to point going to a tower that a local ISP is set up. And again, at that point, 5 meg down, if you were lucky, is crazy.
It depends a lot, because some of the, especially in some of the rural areas here in the States, they've actually put together, and a lot of it depends on the topography, right? If you're in a hilly or mountainous area, you're hosed. That's, one of the reasons why Starlink has been so successful. But I've seen places where you're getting 100 megabits symmetrical, 50, 100 megabit or higher, off of, pretty affordable, wireless systems. But it's kind of crazy. Like, I'm with you. We were spending a staggering amount of money, when we were full-time RVing, and we basically had to do 2 or 3 wireless accounts, and because it was a mixture of where we could get a satellite or where we could get a cell tower connection, and had we blown through all the data that was available on that, and
at least. And here's what's crazy. You would think that what you were paying was exorbitant. Try it on this side of the border, because those MiFis that you could add to a Verizon account for, $100 a month or whatever it is, that's a $500 to $700 a month charge here. Like it's obscene.
What's the line? It's Rogers country. You're just living in it.
Pretty much. All right, gentlemen, we are going to wrap it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Patrick, if people want to connect with you, learn more about your podcast or what you're doing over there at CTI, where can they do that?
I'm just going to tell everybody to head over to AVNation.tv if you haven't seen the articles that are coming up lately and some of the original content, or if you're just trying to figure out what's new and exciting, it is a great place to go. So I'm going to drive people right back to the website this podcast is hosted on.
Very nice. Jeremy, my friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about residential tech today, where can they do that?
Yeah, visit restechtoday.com and check out our podcast as well, and read industry news. And if you need to find me personally, LinkedIn is probably the best place. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. As always, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter or X or most other platforms at Matt D. Scott. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of our other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.